It was supposed to be an ordinary evening on a quiet suburban road. The hum of passing cars and the fading glow of sunset painted the streets in calmness. But that peace shattered in an instant when flashing blue lights filled the rearview mirror of a woman's car. She pulled over, steady and calm, yet what followed would ignite outrage, spark disbelief, and expose the dangerous mix of arrogance and prejudice. The officer who approached her vehicle didn't see her as a person of respect, or as someone who had dedicated her life to protecting this nation. All he saw was her skin color. And in that single moment, a decision was made that would change everything. Welcome to Talecraft. Here we bring you real stories told with the depth and detail they deserve. And if you're joining us for the very first time, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone in power thinks they can do anything without consequences? If your answer is yes, then you're in the right place. Before we dive deep, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring you more stories that need to be heard. Tonight's story is more than just an encounter gone wrong. It is about a woman who carried stars on her shoulder, a U.S. Army general who spent decades rising through the ranks, serving her country with honor. Yet one racist cop, blinded by his own prejudice, saw none of that. Instead, he decided to arrest her as though she was just another civilian he could intimidate. What he didn't realize was that this woman had power far beyond his imagination. And when she made a single call, not to a lawyer, not to a family member, but straight to the Pentagon, the officer's world turned upside down. Why does this story matter? Because it reveals a truth too many have lived: the danger of unchecked bias. It's not only about one officer making a bad choice, it's about how quickly respect can vanish when racism takes control. But it's also about strength, dignity, and the moment when authority meets justice head-on. So buckle up, because this story isn't just about an arrest. It's about how a single phone call reminded the world what true power looks like. The night air was calm, but inside her vehicle, General Angela Morris, a decorated U.S. Army officer with more than 30 years of service, was already on alert. She had pulled over smoothly, hands placed firmly on the wheel, every move deliberate. Like every soldier trained in discipline, she knew how to stay calm in tense situations. But this wasn't combat. This wasn't a battlefield overseas. This was home, in the very country she had dedicated her life to protecting. And yet, as she watched the patrol car door swing open in her side mirror, she sensed a storm was about to begin. The officer approached, heavy boots crunching against the gravel shoulder of the road. His flashlight cut across her windshield, blinding and aggressive. "License and registration," he barked, without introduction, without courtesy, without the professional tone officers were trained to use. Angela responded calmly, announcing each of her movements before reaching into her purse. She had learned long ago, as a black woman in America, the importance of narrating her actions during a traffic stop. But instead of easing tension, her calmness seemed to aggravate him. "Don't get smart with me," he snapped, yanking the door handle. She looked up, startled but composed. "Officer, I've complied with every request," she said firmly. That was when he leaned closer, his tone dropping to a chilling threat. "People like you think you're above the law. Not tonight." Within seconds, the situation escalated. The officer demanded she step out of the vehicle, his hand hovering dangerously close to his holstered weapon. Angela tried to reason, reminding him that she was a senior officer in the United States Army, but instead of respect, her words fueled his anger. "I don't care if you're the president," he sneered. "Step out now." As she obeyed, he yanked her arm with unnecessary force, spinning her around and pressing her against the hood of her car. The metal was cold against her cheek. Her uniform, neatly folded on the back seat after a long day at the Pentagon, suddenly felt like a distant memory. Right now, in this officer's eyes, she wasn't a general. She wasn't a leader who had commanded soldiers in war zones. She was simply a black woman, treated with suspicion and disdain. The handcuffs clicked tightly around her wrists, the metal biting into her skin. It wasn't just physical restraint, it was humiliation. Cars slowed as drivers passed, some staring, others recording on their phones. Angela could hear whispers. What did she do? Why are they arresting her? The scene painted a false picture, one that stripped her of her identity and replaced it with a label of criminal. Inside, anger burned, but discipline kept her steady. She knew losing her composure would only feed the officer's narrative. Still, the thought repeated in her mind, is this what my years of service amount to? Is this how easily my dignity can be erased? The officer shoved her toward his patrol car, muttering insults under his breath. He had no idea who he was dealing with, no idea that the woman he was treating like a common suspect was one of the highest-ranking leaders in the Army. But Angela wasn't about to argue or reveal all her cards. Not yet. She allowed herself to be placed in the back of the squad car, her eyes calm but calculating. At the station, the mistreatment continued. She was fingerprinted roughly, her belongings dumped on a table with no care. The officer filled out paperwork with smug satisfaction, convinced he had put someone in their place. Angela remained silent, her mind sharp. Every soldier knew that sometimes the greatest strength wasn't in striking first, but in waiting for the right moment. And that moment was coming. Because unlike ordinary citizens, Angela had a lifeline few could imagine. One phone call. One number. A direct line to the Pentagon itself. A line that could shift the balance of power in seconds. The officer thought he had control, but in truth he had just set the stage for his own downfall. The holding room was dim, its single flickering light buzzing overhead. General Angela Morris sat on the hard metal bench, her wrists still red from the handcuffs that had been removed only moments earlier. The officer who arrested her leaned smugly against the wall, arms crossed, satisfied with his work. He had no idea who she was, no idea of the storm he had just unleashed. Angela sat silently, her posture calm, but her mind was sharp and focused. Soldiers were trained never to waste energy on anger, they were trained to act with precision. And now it was time to act. "Can I make a phone call?" Angela asked, her voice steady, even commanding. The officer scoffed. "What, you gonna call your lawyer?" "Go ahead. Won't make a difference." He slid a phone across the table, the dismissiveness in his tone cutting like glass. Angela picked it up slowly, dialing from memory. Her hands didn't tremble. She had called this number only a handful of times in her life, a number reserved for situations that demanded immediate attention at the highest level. The line clicked, and a voice on the other end answered crisply, "Pentagon Operations." Angela spoke in a low, deliberate tone. "This is General Angela Morris. I need immediate assistance. Badge number of the officer detaining me is..." She recited the information clearly, making sure every word was logged. Silence filled the air for half a second, then the operator responded firmly, "Understood, General. Stay where you are. We're dispatching protocol now." The officer chuckled, shaking his head. "The Pentagon? Lady, you expect me to believe you've got Washington on speed dial?" He laughed, but his laughter faltered when Angela met his eyes with a look of unshakable authority. "Son," she said quietly, "you have no idea who you're dealing with." Minutes later, the atmosphere in the small station began to shift. The phone at the front desk rang sharp and urgent. Another officer answered, his face paling as he listened. He whispered something to the sergeant in charge, who hurriedly picked up a different line. Within moments, the entire room seemed to tighten with tension. The Pentagon wasn't just calling, they were demanding. Outside, the wail of sirens filled the night again, but these weren't ordinary patrol cars. Black SUVs rolled up to the station, their tinted windows reflecting the harsh streetlights. The doors opened and men in dark suits stepped out, federal agents, their presence unmistakable. Soldiers followed, their uniforms pressed, their demeanor rigid. The station, once filled with arrogance and laughter, fell into stunned silence. The arresting officer's face drained of color as he watched the entourage march inside. He shifted uncomfortably, suddenly less sure of himself. His colleagues looked at him, whispering nervously. "What did you do?" one muttered under his breath. The commanding federal agent entered the holding room, his eyes immediately locking on Angela. He straightened and saluted sharply. "General Morris, ma'am. We're here on direct orders from the Pentagon. Are you all right?" The room froze. Every officer stared, realization hitting them all at once. The woman they had mocked, handcuffed, and humiliated wasn't just someone important. She was one of the highest-ranking leaders in the U.S. military. Angela stood slowly, her composure flawless. "I'm fine," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of command. "But I will not forget what's happened here tonight." The officer who had arrested her stammered, "General? Wait, I didn't know." His words tumbled out, but no one was listening. The federal agents surrounded Angela, treating her with the respect she deserved. One of them leaned in and whispered, "Ma'am, the secretary has already been informed. This will be dealt with." For the first time, Angela allowed herself to breathe deeply. Not out of relief, but out of clarity. She hadn't made the call to protect herself. She had made it to send a message. No one, not even those who wore badges of authority, was above accountability. And now, accountability had arrived in force. As Angela walked out of the station, flanked by federal escorts, the officer who had mocked her stood frozen in place. The reality of his actions was sinking in fast. He hadn't just arrested a woman. He had arrested a general, and the Pentagon itself had just responded. The morning after the incident, the small-town police station was no longer quiet. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky. Reporters swarmed the sidewalks, cameras flashing as anchors spoke live on air. The story had spread overnight like wildfire. Local police arrest U.S. Army general, Pentagon responds immediately. What began as an arrogant display of power by a single officer had erupted into a national scandal. General Angela Morris had chosen not to make a public statement immediately. Instead, she allowed the truth to speak for itself. Video footage, captured by bystanders on their phones, showed every detail: the unjust stop, the dismissive tone of the officer, the moment of handcuffs clamping on her wrists. But what made the footage explosive wasn't just the act itself. It was the stark contrast between the officer's arrogance and Angela's calm, commanding composure. Millions watched in disbelief. On social media, the response was immediate. Hashtags calling for justice trended across platforms. Veterans groups rallied in support, releasing statements defending Angela's integrity and condemning the officer's actions. "She served this country with honor," one veteran wrote. "To treat her this way is an insult to every man and woman in uniform." The outrage wasn't just local. It was national, even global. Inside the police station, panic had replaced pride. The officer who arrested Angela was suspended within hours, his name plastered across headlines. His smug grin, once caught on body cam, now circulated the internet as a symbol of disgrace. His fellow officers avoided him, some shaking their heads, others whispering that he had brought shame to the entire department. The chief of police, faced with a storm he could not contain, scheduled an emergency press conference. At the press conference, the chief stood stiffly before microphones, his words careful but hollow. "The actions taken by one of our officers do not represent the values of this department," he insisted. "We are cooperating fully with federal authorities." Reporters pounced on him with questions. How could your department arrest a decorated U.S. general? Was racial profiling involved? What disciplinary action is being taken? The chief stumbled, his answers doing little to stem the fury. Meanwhile, Angela was back in Washington, sitting quietly in her office at the Pentagon. She wasn't smiling, nor was she triumphant. Instead, she was reflective. She knew this wasn't just about her, it was about every person who had been stopped, questioned, or humiliated without cause. This moment was bigger than her personal story. It was an opportunity to shed light on a system that needed change. She spoke privately with the Secretary of Defense, who assured her that the Pentagon stood firmly behind her. Military leaders released official statements honoring her service and denouncing the incident. "General Morris represents the highest standards of leadership and sacrifice," one statement read. "She deserves respect not only as a soldier but as an American citizen." Those words carried weight, and soon members of Congress joined the conversation, demanding investigations and reforms. The officer at the center of the scandal faced consequences swiftly. His badge was taken, his record tarnished, and his career effectively ended. What he thought was a routine display of power had destroyed his future. And while he attempted to apologize publicly, few were willing to listen. His arrogance had been captured on camera, and the world had already judged him. For the police department, the consequences rippled outward. Funding was questioned, oversight committees were formed, and training programs were mandated. The community, once quiet and overlooked, became a focal point for national debate on justice, equality, and accountability. Protests filled the streets, peaceful but powerful, as citizens demanded better from those sworn to protect them. And through it all, General Morris remained steady. She finally spoke, not with anger but with resolve. Standing before cameras, she addressed the nation. "This was never about me alone. This is about the values we uphold as Americans: respect, justice, and equality. No one is above the law, but no one should be beneath its protection either." Her words echoed far beyond the room, striking chords in the hearts of millions who had felt voiceless. The incident that had begun with one officer's arrogance had transformed into a national reckoning. Angela hadn't sought the spotlight, but she used it to remind the world that leadership isn't about rank or title. It's about standing firm even in the face of injustice and choosing to respond not with hatred, but with strength and principle. In the days that followed, the dust began to settle, but the impact of the event lingered like a powerful echo. What started as a routine traffic stop had escalated into a nationwide conversation about justice, equality, and respect. For General Angela Morris, the ordeal was never about revenge or humiliation. Instead, it became an opportunity to shine a light on what too many had experienced in silence. Her strength had transformed one act of injustice into a message for the world. Communities across the country looked to her not just as a leader in uniform but as a symbol of resilience. Parents told their children her story, teaching them that dignity can withstand even the harshest tests. Veterans saluted her, grateful that she had carried herself with the same honor she had shown in combat. And ordinary citizens, people who had never worn a uniform, found courage in her words. She had taken pain and turned it into purpose. The officer's downfall was swift, but it was never the most important part of the story. The true legacy was the conversation it sparked, a demand for accountability, a push for reform, and a reminder that respect must be earned, not forced. While his career ended in disgrace, Angela's voice rose stronger than ever. In her calm yet commanding way, she reminded the nation that true power lies not in a badge or a weapon, but in integrity. For viewers like you, this story holds a deeper lesson. It's not only about what happened to General Morris but about the everyday choices we face when confronted with injustice. Do we remain silent, or do we stand up? Do we look away, or do we shine a light on the truth? Angela's story proves that one person's courage can shift an entire narrative, and sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply refusing to be broken. And so, as we close this chapter, let me ask you, what would you have done in her place? Would you have stayed calm, knowing the weight of your position, or would anger have taken over? Her composure teaches us that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it is quiet, steady, and unshakable. That is the kind of strength the world needs more of today. Thank you for staying with us through this journey here on Talecraft. Stories like these remind us not only of the flaws in our systems but also of the extraordinary individuals who rise above them. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it inspired you in any way, I encourage you to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful true stories that deserve to be heard. And don't forget, your voice matters too. Drop a comment below and tell us what lessons you take away from General Morris's experience. Because here at Talecraft, we don't just tell stories, we craft them to spark reflection, courage, and change.